So I figure we'll just start with you telling everyone a little bit about yourself.
Okay, yeah. So I'm Kyra Condie. I'm 23. I've been living in Minnesota since forever. This is where I started climbing, and I started climbing when I was 11 or 10 or 11, and then when I was 12, I got a spinal fusion surgery that kind of really reminded me how much climbing meant to me. Is like the biggest thing that it did, and then I was able to start climbing 4 months again after that surgery. And ever since then, I've never taken more than like a week off of climbing. I love it. I've been really lucky to not get many injuries, which has been really good. And now I compete on like the international level and national level at competitions, and I have the goal right now of making the 2020 Olympics. So
very nice. So you had your spinal fusion just a year after you started climbing.
Yeah, it was like year and a half probably.
And you just got back from Tokyo.
I did. I just got back from Tokyo where the World Championships was held.
How was that?
It was pretty good. It had like highs and lows for me. Bouldering went really well, which is my favorite, so that was cool. But then I could have done better in lead, and speed went good, but not amazing. So,
were you still happy with your performance?
Overall, yeah. I think if it was a little bit of a bummer because I was really close to making it on to the combined qualifier, which is where like the Olympic format was. I was like 2 spots out, 3 spots out or something. And so if I had done just like slightly better in any one of the disciplines, I probably would have been in. So that was a little bit disappointing, but otherwise pretty happy.
Very nice. So do you still have a chance to qualify? How does that work now?
Yeah, I do. So since Brooke qualified at the World Championships, there's only 1 spot left for U.S. girls now, which means that like the rest of us are kind of vying for that spot. And there's 2 more chances. One is the Toulouse qualifier, which is an invitation event. And then the other one is the Pan American Championships. And so at the Toulouse event, you first have to get an invite, which is by doing well enough at the World Cups this year. Right now I have an invite, but I have to make sure there's still a couple World Cups left. And then the other chance is in the Pan Ams, which is the winner of that one gets to go.
Okay. And when are those coming up?
Those are in the end of February, I believe.
Okay. So still a while until that. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll be rooting for you. Cool. So yeah, I kind of wanted to focus on your spinal surgery and kind of what you went through with that. So you were saying that you got that when you were 12. Did you ever know ahead of time, like when you were growing up, that you had something going on with your spine, or did you just know when you went to the doctor that day?
Well, so how it actually worked is I think that at your annual checkup, they usually check for scoliosis when you're growing up. I had gone to a different doctor the year before, and I think they would have caught it if they had checked, but they didn't actually check for scoliosis. And then that whole next year, probably, I was kind of getting like achy back pain, and then it got like kind of a lot worse, and I started complaining about it, and I wasn't really one to complain or even tell my parents when I was sick. And so, I started complaining about it, then they started kind of realizing that maybe something was wrong. And then I started doing some Googling and like found out that scoliosis was really common, especially in like young adolescent girls. And basically I had a friend at the gym who was a physical therapist, and I asked him if he knew how to check for scoliosis, and he did, obviously, and had me like do the bend test. And he checked for it and was like, oh, yeah, you need to go see a doctor, like for sure. And so I went to the doctor and got an x-ray. And that's when we were when I was like officially diagnosed. And my curve was already at like 53 degrees at that first doctor's visit. And so she immediately referred me to surgeons because kind of when it's past 45 degrees is what I understand is when they recommend surgery. And so I was already kind of well past that point.
Yeah, and I've seen your pictures on your Instagram and just of you bending over. It's amazing that no one had caught that prior because it's pretty pronounced.
So what's funny is that I had coaches at the time. I was on a team at the gym, and, they would always yell at me while I was doing like core exercises or things like that my form was bad. So like I'd be in a plank and they'd tell me that I was like twisting to one side and favoring like my left arm. And I was like, I'm not, like I'm straight right now. I don't know what you're talking about. And then, like, I only realized this a couple of years ago. I was like, oh, my God, that's because of my scoliosis. Because I still have a bit of a curve now, and somebody was talking to me while I was doing push-ups. And they're like, oh, you're favoring your left arm. And I was like, no, I'm not.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm
I know
not.
how to do push-ups.
Now you're confident and you can say, no, I'm not.
Yeah, so it was kind of funny that I realized that was what was causing that. So yeah, somehow nobody noticed. It was pretty severe.
So you go to your doctor's appointment. They say you have to get. Do they automatically say yes? You have to get this, 10-level fusion.
She didn't know exactly how many vertebrae right away, and I actually went to 3 different surgeons to get different opinions. And the first surgeon actually wanted to fuse 12 vertebrae. He was at the Mayo Clinic, which is it's the Mayo Clinic. It's world renowned, and so we immediately went there because we're in Minnesota. And I didn't like the doctor very much, and the nurse practitioner was the person who did all of the tests. So usually, at least when I was going into these surgeons, they would do all these own little measurements, measure the distance between your shoulders, measure the degree of the hump on your back, and then they would also watch you walk back and forth, all these things. And so the first doctor I went to, the nurse practitioner did all those things, and then the surgeon came in afterwards and just oh yeah, we're going to fuse these ones. Oh, you're crying? That's okay. One day you'll have a family. You won't care about climbing. And so I really didn't like that doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I told my parents right away I didn't like him. And then we went to a different doctor, got another opinion, and he was way more involved in the whole process, and told me that I would be on top of a podium, no problem, knew that climbing meant a lot to me, and then even was going to fuse less vertebrae. So the first doctor wanted to fuse 12 and go into my L vertebrae, and the second doctor only wanted to fuse 10 and stay in the T vertebrae. Mm-hmm. And I think that has had a really big impact in why I can climb the way I can, because so much of your bending comes from those L vertebrae.
Definitely. That's awesome. Yeah. So did the first doctor tell you just to stop climbing?
He didn't necessarily say stop climbing, but he wasn't, supportive is the word, or reassuring that I would get back to it. Whereas the next doctor was like, oh yeah, you're athletic, you're fine, you can do that. I don't know if he knew exactly how much falling and stuff is involved in climbing, but yeah, he basically told me the only things I couldn't do was contact sports and tumbling gymnastics. So.
Oh, well, climbing's not that different, really.
I know. I don't think he was picturing bouldering, but so far I've had no problems, knock on wood, but it's been not 9 years since I got it. I don't remember. Yeah. 9 years since I got my surgery. And so, and I've had, no problems with falling or anything. So
that's amazing. Maybe it's a blessing that he didn't know that much about climbing.
Exactly.
So did you ever get physical therapy after your surgery?
I didn't really for the back because mostly the recovery was just letting the bone heal. Mm-hmm. But I recently was working with a physical therapist actually at the World Championships, and she showed me exercises to kind of mobilize your ribs, which I didn't really know was a thing even. And I think they would have been super helpful back when I got the surgery. Mm-hmm. And they have been helping a lot actually, because I have one of my lungs is kind of compressed a little bit because of I still have a curve in my spine, and it's been helping me with that a lot to be able to expand my rib cage better. Cool. I guess.
What does that look like?
The exercises and stuff. Yeah, so she has me. One of them is you wrap a towel around your torso and kind of hold it tight, and then add constriction basically while you breathe, and then a bunch of other ones basically involve laying on a ball and breathing in different with having the ball in different spots. And then there's one other one that's just kind of cool, which is you breathe out with pressure, putting pressure on your ribs, kind of low ribs, and then you do a quick jolt to then and then breathe in really fast. That's the best way I can describe it.
I know, it's hard to actually describe what you're doing. Cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So have you noticed that's making kind of a difference in how you feel?
Yeah, for sure. And I think I feel a little bit less immobile in that area, because I didn't think that I could gain back any mobility, because it's just, that whole section of my spine is fused. But I didn't think about mobility in the actual ribs and stuff that maybe could come back. Mm-hmm.
And do you have any trouble when you're climbing?
So as I've gotten better at climbing, I've actually run into more and more moves that I have issues with. So when your feet get further apart from your hands and you have to keep like body tension all the way through. A lot of times you can compensate for how hard that move would be by like twisting in or like doing things like that, and I can't compensate like that. And so a lot of the times those moves I have to do either the hard way or just kind of painful. And then as moves get kind of weirder as well, there's some difficulty. Like sometimes you have to like kind of reach behind you, like grab something and then reach behind you and arch. And that's something that I have a really hard time with because I can't really arch my back at all. And then, yeah, twisting, I pretty much have no twist available. So I have to twist for my hips. And so as soon as my hips are like immobile, like as soon as like I have 2 feet and can't twist my hips for some reason, I have a lot less mobility. And so sometimes that affects me as well.
That's amazing. Just watching you climb, you would not realize that you can't twist. I mean, you look like you are getting into a lot of twisty and bendy positions in your climbing, but yeah, it's amazing. So
yeah, I've gotten to make up a lot of it with like hip mobility and stuff like that.
Right. That's what I was going to say. Do you work more on your hip mobility to just kind of compensate that way? So that way you can really focus more on that.
Yeah. So those are the things that like PT has really helped me with kind of, like longer term. It's like, I can't really do a whole lot for the actual back, but, as far as how it can help like my climbing and things like that. Yeah. Hip mobility. I have to climb square a lot of times. And so it's kind of, aggressive on your knees. And so just a bunch of like knee PT, like strengthening exercises, things like that have been really helpful.
Cool. So you're an amazingly accomplished climber. And I want to talk a little bit about kind of your mindset. So you're 12 years old, you get this surgery. You were not an Olympic USA team climbing member at that point. How did you work your mindset around you get this significant fusion? I don't know if you ever knew anyone your age that was getting it. Maybe you were the only one. How do you structure your mindset around, okay, I'm going to continue to push my climbing limits? And was the USA team always one of your goals? I know that was a ton of questions.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, I guess to start answering that is, like I was kind of at that phase in climbing / young teenage life, where I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to go to the gym. Like, I don't want to go to practice tonight. I kind of want to hang out with my friends at the park, like that kind of stage. And so then having this surgery where climbing got taken away, it, like, I think happened really at the ideal time for me because I didn't get that burnout. Like I was kind of maybe nearing that burnout stage. And instead, like, I just like got it taken away from me and realized how much I loved it. And so that kind of really, I think, sparked wanting to get better, like even more than it had before. And so I had dreams of, like winning nationals, things like that. And that's why the doctor I ended up going to the surgeon or to get surgery from. That's why he said, send me a photo when you're on top of the podium. Like he knew that was a goal of mine. And so it wasn't actually until after my surgery that I got like kind of good. I had been making like finals at youth nationals, but it wasn't until a year and a half after my surgery that I actually won nationals. And so I think part of it was, it was a source of motivation. It's like, I'm not going to let this like stop me. And then I think that has kind of just carried on in general. I'm kind of stubborn, and I think that is really helpful in sports, and especially climbing, since it's so much failure that like, if you don't have that like tenacity, you're not going to last in climbing in general. So, I would say that's probably where a lot of my mindset comes from. Like I'll let something, like I'll fail on something and I'll be like, dang, that doesn't seem possible, but then I'll keep trying it. And I think that's something that you need.
So just the inspiration of not being able to climb, or just not being able to climb, kind of inspired you to try as hard as you can because it got taken away from you.
I think that's, kind of one of the biggest things. And it's actually, basically fueled me ever since, like since my surgery. So I took 4 months off for the surgery. Since then, I don't think I've taken more than a week off.
Wow. Very nice. And is there anyone that has inspired you along the way?
So I guess one of the first people who I ever met who was like a pro climber is Alex Johnson, because she climbed at the same gym as me when I first started. And she even came and visited me in the hospital. I was talking to her about this the other day, and now she's like a super good friend of mine.
Nice.
But when I started, she was like 19 and I was 11. So like it was kind of more of a coach relationship. But she was super busy. But so she was probably one of the first people I really looked up to. But then after that, like there was nobody who was really like me. Like in that way. So I didn't have anybody to like look to for that. it was kind of before like Instagram was really big and things like that. And so it wasn't easily accessible, all these like information. So I had a bunch of climbing magazines and things like that. But I probably looked up to like some of the World Cup stars at the time, like on the store and people like that.
Did you have anyone that you knew that went through something that you were going through, like had a major surgery and came back from it?
At the time, no. Now, because of Instagram and like my post, people like sharing it and stuff, I've gotten a lot of messages about tons of climbers who have had back surgeries and the same surgery as me, and I think that's really cool, actually.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it's equally as cool that you didn't know anyone and you still pursued what you did. You know, you didn't have anyone that went through what you went through and you still, you know, got on top.
Yeah, I think I'm really lucky that it worked out the way it did. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you have any specific like down moments when you were going through this, and any ways to kind of get over that?
Well, it was a while ago, so it's hard to remember exactly then, but I still do occasionally have moments where I'm like, especially like while I'm like on the mats, like competing, like at a bouldering competition, I'll like turn around and see a move, and sometimes I'm like, oh, that's going to be really hard for me. Or I won't realize it, and then I get on the wall, and I'm like, what the heck? How is this even possible? And then I remember like, oh, I can't bend.
Uh-huh.
And so I've had moments like that have been, those are always the most frustrating to me, because sometimes it feels like totally impossible. And I like I said, climbing's a lot of failure, but like it always feels like at least possible or overcomable. And so as soon as something feels like it's not, that's kind of when things have become the most frustrating. Usually though, I've even working with coaches and things like that has been really helpful for moves like that, and even PTs, because they can think about movement in a different way, and help me come up with different ways of doing a move that I maybe wouldn't have thought of, like if I'm not watching videos of myself and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so that has even gotten a lot better.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really helpful. And then, so where are you now, basically? You kind of talked about a little bit. You just got back from Tokyo. You're pursuing the next round to get into the Olympics, hopefully. So what are you doing day to day, and how are you preparing? Are you just climbing? Are you going to school?
Yeah, so I actually finished school. I graduated from the University of Minnesota with a bachelor's in animal science. Pre-vet, so I took all like the pre-med, pre-vet classes, and that was last April that I graduated, April 2018. And so like, yeah, this whole last year I've been able to focus pretty much entirely on climbing and kind of qualifying for the Olympics. And so right now I'm home in between competitions, and it's kind of just a focused training time, which is really nice. I kind of tend to do 2 days on, 1 day off, but the 2 days that I do, I used to do 3 days on, but now I've kind of switched it up because I think more rest is good. And I've been seeing like a lot of improvement actually that way. So I've been, on my rest days, I try to keep it as mellow as possible, run errands, clean the house, things like that, answer emails, do things like this. Uh-huh. And then on, climbing days, I go pretty hard and sometimes do double sessions, and things like that.
Nice. So are you pursuing a veterinarian school? Yeah,
I want to be a vet eventually. Cool. But right now, I'm kind of making the pro climbing thing work.
Right,
so I'm going to make that work for as long as possible. But like the 2 things that I would have ever wanted to be in my whole life are, a vet or a pro climber. So I'm going to eventually try to do both. But
that's amazing. Awesome. And then kind of my last question for you is, what moves you? So what moves you physically, mentally? What do you have any mantras that keep you motivated? What's kind of your inner dialogue?
So I guess like what's a kind of funny mantra that like the whole like climbing community in Minnesota has is "you suck, try harder," which is like pretty applicable to climbing. It's like, yeah, you're getting beaten down, but like just try harder and maybe it'll work. And yeah, that's kind of one of my biggest ones, I guess. But what moves me is that's a hard question off the bat. I think I have a really big drive to want to get better, and I really enjoy the work that I put into it. Like, I don't want to win because I got lucky. I want to win because I know I put in all the effort in and worked as hard as I can. and those are always the people that I've always looked up to, are the people who, like, I know work hard, you know, maybe are working a full-time job and training full-time and, you know, things like that. That's always really inspired me.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess a kind of similar question is, why do you climb?
Oh man, that's a hard question too. Well, I climb because I love it at the very base of it. And I think it's challenges you mentally and physically, and that's not something you get in all sports. And I also just love the community. Like, I'm so in it now that, like, I could never stop.
Yeah. And then where can people find you if they want to learn more about you?
In what? Sorry?
If they want to learn more about you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Instagram's probably the best spot. I always reply to messages. Kind of surprises people usually, but, like, I don't know. I like to interact. So, yeah, Instagram, Kyra Condie. And I have a Facebook page, but really bad about keeping up on it. But Instagram's probably the best one.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much. If there's anything else that you wanted to add, feel free.
Not that I can think of off the top of my head.
Awesome. Yeah. And I will be rooting for you, watching you on Instagram and all of your adventures. So I wish you the best of luck.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah.